the Arizona Cardinals select Walter Nolen, defensive tackle, Mississippi.
All right, joining us now from ESPN, Josh Weinfuss, who joins us here on the Right to It guest line. You can follow him on X at Josh Weinfuss, and he joins us to talk some Cardinals draft. Josh, thanks for some time today. When you look now, you've had some time to digest this. What pick did you like the best? That when you put the value together and where they got him, with the guy that could probably help this team the best and for a long period of time, who would you have picked, or who is your pick?
First off, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Honestly, I love the first two picks.
Okay.
I love Walter Nolen. I love Will Johnson. I think Will Johnson's the type of pick that it's either going to be a boom or bust, right? And boom, it's going to be a real big boom, and bust, it's going to be a real big bust. And I just think it's because we don't know the true health of his knee. If they get 5, 6, 7 years out of him at a high level, I think it's a great pick. Maybe his knee has some severe issues that he will take some time to work through, or they might even linger. We don't know. That's the problem. But I think with Walter Nolen, he's the type of guy the Cardinals have been needing for a long time, kind of that dog, right? Just that guy who will get after it, doesn't care, right? He's unapologetically himself, and I think that's going to it's going to be a refreshing fit in this locker room. I think it's somebody that the Cardinals typically don't go after, but I think it's somebody they need. And yes, I would say the first two picks.
Josh, going into the weekend, which positions did you have slotted that you knew they needed to fill? They needed picks.
So going into the weekend, I really thought that they would address guard and wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that they wanted to kind of shore up the edge. We knew they wanted to build some more depth and maybe get a stud up front, that front seven. We also knew that corner was going to be addressed, and inside linebacker, and they addressed all of that except for receiver. They drafted a guard in the later rounds out of Texas. Obviously they focus on defense. 6 of their 7 picks were on the defensive side of the ball. So we knew that was going to be a thing. I don't think anybody knew, including, from what Monti Ossenfort said, him as well, that they were going to go so heavy on defense. But I really thought that they would take a high pick and address their needs at guard, maybe even right tackle, and then receiver, which they did not do.
Josh, as I was texting you, it's Minucci, always good to catch up. I was going, where's the firepower? Where's the home run hitter? And you wrote about that this afternoon. Not that I influenced you one way or the other, but will the offense have enough firepower to make a significant jump in 2025? The lead of your article. And I thought the same thing. Where's that juice, that extra juice going to come from on this offense?
It's a very good question. Now, as anyone who follows the league knows, guys will be released this week. There'll be guys available. Some vets probably won't sign until training camp, and then after the final cuts, there'll be a lot of guys in the market. So there's about 3 more opportunities for the Cardinals to address some of their needs. I don't see them trading for an offensive stud. But, like I wrote this morning, I am very curious because you have Kyler Murray. He's poised to have a big year. Then you have Marvin Harrison Jr. He's your top receiving option. But then really your number 2 receiving option is tight end Trey McBride. And then your third receiving option is Michael Wilson. And then maybe it depends on how the board falls after that. Maybe it's Greg Dortch. Maybe it's Zay Jones. There's a lot of options. But I still think that they needed to address receiver. They needed to give Kyler one more true receiving option. So when you go 3 wide, there is a lot of fear in a defensive player's eyes, right? And I don't think they have that truly yet. Obviously, we don't know what Marvin Harrison is going to look like this year. I think that's the big thing. If he can be that 1,500-yard receiver, then I think that kind of changes things. But I still think that they need to go out and get at least one more playmaker.
There's a free agent out there. His name's Amari Cooper. Would they chase him or not? Or in your observation, do you still think he has gas in the tank?
He's the type of guy that I could see them going after in July. Maybe there's calling to check in, see what his interest level is until playing. And then maybe, depending on the situation, depending on the price, I think those are the 2 big keys. I think that could be a guy that they entertain later on, just for a couple of reasons. A, he's another option. He's proven they know he can make plays. He brings a lot of leadership to a locker room. He brings a lot of veteran experience to a locker room, especially a room that's very young, that a lot of these receivers could use some more veteran guidance. I think he would be really good for that. But if they do, put some feelers out for Amari Cooper, it won't be until July.
Josh, when you look at the influence of the SEC and Big Ten for this draft, does Monti Ossenfort, is he purposely, strategically wise, looking at the best of the best at the key positions the Cardinals need? I mean, I know the competition in my mind is paramount, but you got 2 from the SEC and you got 3 from the Big Ten. How much does that influence him, or does he even go down that road?
As a Big Ten alum myself, I would say there's no better conference in America.
Yes.
But with all that being said, I don't think he's sitting there saying, okay, this guy's from Ohio State, we're going to go after him. I think it's more along like if the board falls a certain way, and I think maybe if 2 guys are tied, I think then he will start looking at, okay, what did this guy do in college? Where did he play? What kind of experience does he have? Because one thing that we heard all weekend is that the guys from Ohio State and the big schools, they have experience in high pressure situations because of the playoff, because of the national championship. And that played a factor into some of these decisions. So I don't want to say that he's specifically looking at a Big Ten or SEC player, but I will say that it does help some of these players when it comes time to pick them because of the situations that they've been in because they're at those schools.
Josh, you put on Twitter, I believe on either it was Sunday or maybe Saturday, to break down the draft picks by position. Were you surprised that wide receiver came in number 1 at 32?
No, I think because outside of quarterback, that's probably the most important position for a football team these days because it's such a pass-heavy league. So if you're going to go spend all this money on these top-tier quarterbacks, you're going to want to give them targets and high-caliber targets, and obviously that's your receiver. Especially with how many, all the rule changes now that have made it a little more favorable for offenses, you're going to go. Your teams are going to try to find their gems, try to find their next 1, 2, and 3 receivers in the draft because they don't cost a ton of money, right? So if you can get a guy for 4 years, 5 years, even if he's a first-round pick, who can produce right off the bat, as the Cardinals saw with Marvin Harrison Jr., or that's why Malik Neighbors went high last year, or the guy from Washington, like they're going to spend that draft capital on them through, and not just even early on, throughout the whole draft.
How important now is it going to be, there will be only 3 preseason games, and if the commish has his way, that'll drop to 2 preseason games. How important then is it, since you're a Big Ten guy, to get the Big Ten and the SEC, those types of players?
I think it's all part of the conversation. Now, all that, with that being said, though, like if they have a guy from a school that's not part of a non-Power 5 or not even maybe a Big 12 school or, an FCS school, if that's even what they call it anymore. If they're good, right? They're not going to care about their experience, but the experience does help these guys maybe shorten that learning curve during training camp. And maybe, in the preseason obviously helps. But I think that if they see the talent there and they know a guy, or they truly feel, you never know, but they truly feel like a guy can adjust and convert to the NFL game quickly, it's not going to matter where they went to school, right? Because they know they will give them time on task, as Jonathan Gannon likes to call it. They're going to give them those reps early on to help them adjust as quick as possible. So while, like a guy like Will Johnson, he had a ton of starts. The kid from Ohio State, I think he had 51 career starts, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that will help them crack the starting lineup sooner. But if a guy isn't from one of those schools, doesn't have that type of experience or in those pressure-packed situations, but they're still really good, I think that accounts for as much.
Josh, you talk about cracking the starting lineup. Do you see Walter Nolen as the starter ahead of Calais Campbell when they line up their very first game of the year?
I do, simply because I think this is where Calais Campbell is in his career, right? I think it'll be, I think with the depth they have in the defensive line, it'll be a kind of a position by rotation. So sure, Walter Nolen might not start a couple games and Calais might start a couple games. So I don't know if it's going to really matter who the quote unquote starter is, but I do see them wanting to get Walter Nolen on the field as soon as possible. That's probably snap 1, day 1, game 1, because of what he can do. And a guy like Calais, he even said it. He's probably good for 30, 35 snaps a game. So whether that's the first snap or the third snap or the fifth snap, I don't think it matters to him. I don't think he wants to come in and make an impact in the few snaps that he'll have. So I think the good thing about this room, right, and I asked both Jonathan Gannon and Monti Ossenfort about it this weekend, is that there are so many veteran players there that they're going to be able to help Walter Nolen along at a rate that I don't think would have been possible at other teams. And they're going to be able to teach him and kind of keep him in line, just like any other, 20, 21-year-old needs to be. So I think it's going to be a real boost for Walter Nolen.
Josh, keep up the great work, man. You do a wonderful job. We appreciate you, man. So thanks so much for coming on with us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
That's Josh Weinfuss. Check him out, ESPN at Josh Weinfuss. Of course, you go to ESPN.com and you are reading about the Cardinals, and it's his work. So he does a tremendous job. Coming up, it's our G2G Protein Bar Game Changers. But first, Toby Keith's horse will be competing at the Kentucky Derby. This is Rocket Minuch with Jimmy B on ESPN 620 on FM on 98.7.